Upgrades.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back yet again for another movie review. Here today, we're going to have our second technical JVS review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. And I couldn't do it without my other co-lead on this one, Ronan Unchained. What's going on, Ronan?
Hello, everybody. What a picture. What a film. This is cinema.
But yeah, I do want to kind of pick your brain because you did go to the early screening just like me on the same exact day, but I think you went to Burbank, California to be able to check it out. Just real quick, what were your emotions getting there and then also leaving out?
My emotions getting there was, I don't know how I'm going to take this third film, because prior to getting this opportunity, which thank you again, Sam and TeamJVS, I had already made the plans and I bought my IMAX tickets that I'm still going to go to watch the marathon, to watch 1, 2, and 3 in the movie theaters on IMAX.
Mm-hmm.
And I had made an effort not to watch the last two films. The last thing I saw, Guardians, was the holiday special with you. And I was like, how am I going to feel? Am I going to remember stuff? And I land, I get to the theater, and the movie starts, and boom, I'm back in. And the Guardians has hold a very special place in my heart. Not even in the MCU, just in pop culture in general.
Yeah.
I consider that first film sort of like the modern Star Wars, if you will, where like nobody, unless you were a hardcore comic book fan who knew who they were, you just knew that this new ragtag team, had a talking tree and a raccoon.
Right.
And it had a killer soundtrack. That was it. And with this new film, for me, it delivers in spades. I do understand some of the constructive criticism that I've heard from folks, and I understand where they're coming from. But to me, this film balanced its humor that sometimes didn't land for me, but sometimes it did, and its heart and drama so much better than Volume 2. And it, for me right now, I don't know if it's appropriate to rank it right now, but out of the theater,
it's a little too soon.
Yeah, I just know that I love the film. I can't wait to see it again. And I'm very fortunate now that I don't have to worry about spoilers. And that's the one thing I tell folks: go watch it. It's worth the price of admission. And don't watch the trailers, and don't just stay out of the internet until it comes out.
Yeah, we're gonna hike right into it. This movie comes out and drops May the 5th. Everybody, there are 2 credit scenes. There's a beginning credit scene, and there's of course the Marvel fashion end credit scene, as well as the tagline. So definitely go in Marvel fashion and go and stay after the film. But yeah, let's go ahead and kind of break it down. As far as just the visual aesthetic, I thought this looked amazing. Some of the shots and cinematography choices. This is a weird thing. The past, man, since Endgame, I felt like the CG, the cinematography has been so lackluster when it comes to Marvel, right? And James Gunn said, hold my beer, I'm about to show you something. This scene alone, I'm not going to tell you the context of it, but the cinematography, the CG, the action, you don't miss a thing. When there's aerial shots happening, you see it, you feel it. But honestly, some of the choices in shots, like some shots where they're just having conversation, when you have an open panned out shot and you can see 2 people in one pan, and then all of a sudden it shows somebody's emotions. Those are signs of great directing, and as well as great shot, like choreography and design. And I thought that this was one of the stronger, not just CG, but like cinematography Marvel films they've done in quite some time. I was gonna pick your brain on that and then segue into the soundtrack, which we got to talk about.
Yes, I echo your sentiments. I feel, and what's weird is that I started feeling this a lot with the Suicide Squad. When James Gunn went to go do the Suicide Squad, he was like, "All right, I learned what I learned doing all my movies and the two Guardians, but now let's switch it up. Let's dial up to 11 and use it in a way that isn't just cut to standard shots, but letting it flow and letting either action, movement, or dialogue flow, and it almost welcomes the audience to be part of the scene and the scenario." Yeah, without giving too much, I'm not giving any details. That photo you showed, it is one of the most like I can't even say it. Like it's one of the most like unique things I had seen in the MCU and superhero movies and just movies in general this year thus far. I mean, we're in April, but um I was so just Google be like, there's no cuts. There's none of this going on. It's just flowing, and you could sense because I overheard over the years that how much James Gunn loves Asian cinema, the kung fu
Yeah.
movies, and you could sense him being like, this is my homage to that, and yet giving my own flavor of it. But I from Suicide Squad to Holiday Special to now, I've loved where he's taken his cinematography, and kudos to the cinematographer and the camera operators who uh, led and followed James into this new area that I dug it so much, and the visuals just popped. It popped like a comic book, like a nice, unique 70s 60s comic book with modern sensibilities, and yeah, it was just beautiful.
Yeah. Like sometimes I gauge like comic book movies. I have to kind of take a retrospective look because it still is a comic book movie, and I kind of ask myself if this was an animated and they kept exactly everything the same. This was just animated. Would it work? And in spades, this would. Like there. I mean, we're gonna talk about tone in just a second, but there are so many moments. I was like, this feels like a comic book moment. But yeah, no, I completely agree with you. We do got to briefly talk about the soundtrack because for me, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 had the best soundtrack of any Marvel film. Like honestly, any movie like that has a baseline soundtrack. And
I would put it up there.
when we know that Spider-Verse is coming out, Spider-Verse 2, the first Spider-Verse had a great soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
Air just came out with your boy Ben Affleck, and I mean that had a great soundtrack. And I was like, man, I need a great soundtrack. And for me personally, I still say the first one is the best. I think actually the second one has some bangers in this one. This one had some emotional bangers and some good moments, but it wasn't as for me as iconic as the first one. I mean, maybe they'll never do anything like that, but maybe I was kind of like, dude, I need this iconic soundtrack. But you may have a difference of opinion of it because I've heard different people say like, no, like this was great. But I wanted your quick thoughts on the soundtrack for this. I was hoping for a lot more, but I'm curious your perspective.
I was hoping that I would still be humming music when I walked out of the theater, that I would recognize some stuff, and that I wouldn't be able to sleep without listening to the soundtrack, and all that happened. I agree. That first soundtrack, dude, I can tell you a story about me going into, I don't know if it was Target or Walmart for the first movie, and the night before the soundtrack dropped, it was already on the shelves, but they just couldn't sell it, and I was just like shaking or to be like, I need my copy. So I took one and I hid it somewhere else under some DVDs collections, and I was just like, that's mine. And I waited till midnight, and I think it was maybe Walmart that they said, okay, now you can buy it. And so I saw people running in getting stuff, and I went, whoop, that's mine, and just bump into it. I mean, not even just hooked on the feeling, but like fool around and fell in love with you.
Dude,
The Runaways, Cherry Bomb. I mean, yes, and I think for this film, the soundtrack was appropriate, and I feel that if it would have been more like Volume 2 or Volume 1, it would have stood out more, but not in favor or in service of the story and what the characters were going through in this film.
Yeah,
I agree. Like the Volume 2 soundtrack, I noticed some songs I knew that I love, and then there was new stuff that I didn't, and it took me a while to come around to that soundtrack. And now Volume 2 soundtrack I love just as much as Volume 1, but I'm gonna say this, and it's not I'm not gonna say the context of when these songs pop up and whatnot. I'm just gonna say that there's a song called "This Is the Day" by The. There's "Crazy on You" by Heart. There's "Do You Realize" by the Flaming Lips, and those are the only three songs I want to name right now. That those three songs, dude, I'm telling you, it's a miracle that I'm not yawning right now. I couldn't sleep last night. I was just listening to that over and over again and making forcing myself not to cry about it. But I agree with you that before the Guardians movies, I had been exposed to Quentin Tarantino and what he does with soundtracks, what Edgar Wright had done with soundtracks, and I think for the past few movies that James Gunn has done, he's put himself up there. That his soundtracks and his choice of music and how he uses it is
mhm,
just as good as QT and Edgar Wright. I
yeah,
mean, I would put the Guardian soundtracks up against the Baby Driver soundtrack, the Scott Pilgrim soundtrack, and the Pulp Fiction soundtrack any day of the week.
yeah,
Um, but I really dug these choices, and I can't wait to see if other further songs grow on me. And these were appropriate. They popped. I mean, you can't go wrong with Heart and Crazy on You, especially when it was used. But yeah, I am like looking now, seeing like when's the physical copy? I need my CD. I need it right now.
yeah. So I think that's a great segue again, because emotion is a very pivotal cornerstone of this film. Dare I say, it has some of the harshest and the most emotionally resonant moments in any of the Guardians movies, or even sometimes I would even say, dare I say, some of the Marvel films. And it's
Oh
centered
yeah,
around this amazing character in Rocket the Raccoon.
oh no.
We're not going to divulge anything. We're not going to spoil anything. But I will say, one, the emotional damage in this film, and the sheer amount of violence and even at times language is up there. Like I was real surprised with some of the things they got away with, but it is the cornerstone of this film. Like Rocket is the cornerstone of this film. And I think that one of the things that James is trying to articulate specifically is that there are no Guardians without Rocket. And I think that the first movie we could feel it, like he's just there. Second movie is kind of like, oh, we need him, even more so than Peter. But in this film, this lays a clear foundation of how pivotal Rocket is and also how special he is. And Bradley Cooper's performance in this one was amazing. I think that because we don't just see a older, jaded Rocket, we see a young Rocket, and some of the things that he has to go through. And I think that his story arc along and aligns with the main villain of this in ways that I didn't think possible. And that's the High Evolutionary. So I think that those were the strongest things about this. I think everybody had decent performances. I love how they allowed Drax to have a little bit more weight in this one. And then, of course, coming off of the holiday special, they gave Mantis a little bit more to do.
Yeah,
But I think that a good calling card to say is that scene that we were describing, that action scene, as that action scene was going, you get to see the evolution of these characters to
yeah,
the point that they are now. Like there's a story being told with every single action moment in that small little moment. And I think that there's a lot to say there. I will comment on something tonally, and I'll let Ronan kind of talk off some of the strong things he thinks about the emotional side of it. Tonally, at times this was very harsh, and then at times this was trying to be very uplifting and funny, and the tones sometimes clashed for me. There were times where there was a Peter situation that was going on and dealing with the whole Gamora aspect, and then there was times where I was like, wow, I'm really into Nebula, and I was like, I love the tone where this is going, and then it would go right back, and there was these tonal shifts that were happening. and it was kind of taking me out of it at times. But I will let Ronan kind of speak on the emotional side of this as well as his thought process on the tone.
Yes, people, James Gunn has been singing from the get go about that we're gonna find out who's Rocket, how much he's very much the core of this story. I agree. What Bradley Cooper and Sean Gunn did with this role, and the other elements of Rocket's life, um, it was beautiful. I said it in one of my either tweet or videos that I've never wanted to hug that damn raccoon so much in my life. And he's not real, but he is real. Damn it. Um, and you know what? I'm also going to say, because people are going to say Rocket, 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 and how much the High Evolutionary and how they two just, in terms of performance, complemented each other. How much Chuck Woody Woochie brought to the High Evolutionary, which I love what he did in Peacemaker. And so when I heard he was in this, I'm like, oh, okay. And then the makeup took me some adjustment to doing initially when I saw that Comic Con panel. I'm like, how's that gonna work? But then in context, you're like, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. Um, Someone who I want to back up so much of what they're doing is Karen Gillan as Nebula. She, man, again, besides Rocket, I want to hug her so much and just tell her that it's okay, that just relax, don't worry. And yeah, you can sense that there's so much kindred spirit with Rocket and Nebula, how much they understand each other, and how much Mantis is the one who is another. If Rocket is the heart of the team, I feel that Mantis is the one who makes sure to bring everyone back and be like, remember why we are here. Remember why we're all family. And besides them, also I want to give a shout out to Chris Pratt as Star Lord. For me, at least, I felt like he still had his Star Lord vibes and whatnot, but he wasn't as goofy as times would stories would let him be, and he was just, if he wasn't sad or drunk or whatnot, he was being serious about stuff, and I love that aspect. And I keep hearing about the tone and whatnot, and I understand where people are coming from with the tone, how it could be mixed at points and it doesn't flow better. But to me, unless we're pinpointing it down on humor and when jokes and bits are presented, then I would agree, because I feel that towards either in the first act and second act, there's several times when there was a joke or a bit brought up right after an emotional moment,
Right.
and it's sort of like, don't underserve it with a joke and whatnot, just to get just to make sure people aren't crying and whatnot. I'm like, this is the last one. We've had 9 years with them chuckles and whatnot. We can, people have grown up. People, if you were a kid in the first one, you have grown up by now. And I feel, this scene. This is a scene that tonally was perfect for me. And I'm not gonna give any context, but I'm gonna, in my theater, this scene with Nebula and Star Lord, it brought the house down. And we were all laughing. We understood it because we've been in that scenario, and they brought something that I had not seen or heard in the MCU, and I was just like, okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But I guess I can kind of agree with people, but to me, the performances and the writing did such a good job of balancing it for the most part that I didn't mind where the tone was fluctuating at times. Again, it was only a matter of you do an emotional scene and then what's that? Or it's my turn to make a joke. That's where I was just like, guys, let's just cool it. Just cool it. Right. And then up until the second, third act, I didn't have that much an issue with that stuff. I think at that point, it was like, yo, this is the end. So enough with the hucks and whatnot. So, and that's something that but here's the thing. When you brought up Drax, they bring that up at points. Because a lot of people have been like, Drax he's just the puppet. He's the punching bag of the jokes. And they bring back stuff from the first film that I was just like, finally we're addressing this, we're speaking this, and if he is humorous, there's a reason to it, and it it's in favor and in service of the story, and that's where I give credit. Where it's like, okay, James, you're still doing your bits and humors, but your drama writing and your emotional stuff is keeping up with it. So just tone it down just a bit, but it wasn't, and it didn't take me away. It didn't take me out of the film.
Yeah, I think the thing that I kind of harping back to is like using Nebula for instance. I really felt like there was a missed opportunity with Nebula
Mm,
in connection with a completely different character. That I think if they would have went down that route, regardless of how this movie ends, I think it would have serviced the overarching as a whole. And I think that they do that with different characters. With Nebula specifically, I think that, dude, honestly, Chakudi, like how he performs the high evolutionary, like he's a psychopath. And
hmm
like that's where it goes into the darker sides of this, where it's like he goes back and forth tonally in his body functions and what he kind of does and expresses, but he still is the same exact terrible person. And there were things that he was doing, and I was like, towards the back half, I was like, I felt like that was a missed opportunity as well. But
Okay.
most missed opportunity, and I know you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It was no, I'm joking. It was this amazing actor playing one of the strongest characters in the MCU.
In the Marvel comics, yes, yes.
Then I'm all talking about Will Porter as Adam Warlock. And I think that this is where it goes down to the anticipation side of stuff and, you know, expectations.
Right.
Expectations a lot of times kills a superhero film. With if we never knew that Adam Warlock was going to be in this film, and it was a complete surprise up until, I think that I wouldn't have any issues with it. But what they did was they hyped up this character in such ways that like by the end of this film, I questioned what was his purpose in this film ultimately. And it's not to say that he didn't tie up some loose threads, and it's not to say that he's gonna be a possible big nugget later. But in terms of this film, I didn't really feel like he serviced the film. I felt like at times it felt like a Thor situation. And you know what I'm saying with that.
Yeah.
He's such a great actor, and the way that they're playing him for almost like a joke. And that for me was disappointing. It didn't hurt
Okay.
or tarnish my experience or enjoyment of the film, but it felt like a missed opportunity. It was sprinkles of missed opportunities there that I felt like this could have been great. That's not to say it's not good. It's not to say it's not
Right.
entertaining, but I felt like there were moments that this could have been great. And I know I'm talking all over the place, but I'm trying to be as vague as possible within the
Right.
story.
Right.
But were there any kind of nuggets, real quick, that you kind of felt where they could have been a little bit better, or things you felt like? I mean, because I'm not even knocking the soundtrack, even though I thought it was weak. I'm not knocking cinematography. I'm not knocking the acting. It's more so some of the threads that bleed into tonal choices, where there was like a tonal shift where it was really comedic. I was like, okay, this could have been some better service to progress something. But yeah, any thoughts for you?
I think it might be just on execution and how people perceive the execution for this film and the fact that it's the last one.
Yeah.
And yeah, on the Adam Warlock thing, in hindsight now, I didn't really have a problem with it. I could understand where people were like, what? Is this what we're getting? But
Right.
I think that might be because I wasn't very like I was excited that, oh, we're gonna get Adam Warlock, cool, and we'll put his playing cool, and he looks cool. But I was so much more concerned on the mortality of of the Guardians, because it's called Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And I feel, and again, we could debate and all that stuff, that I feel that if they would have focused more on Adam Warlocks and not hyping him up, but like pushing more of where he's gonna go in the future and whatnot, I feel that that would have possibly bring down the focus of the Guardians.
Yeah,
And
I agree, but do you think he should have been in the movie? I'm not disparaging that. I'm questioning, did he really need to be in this movie?
I think thematically, and he's not. I think he should have, just because I'm not trying to spoil stuff. It's just because of why the High Evolutionary is the antagonist and what he symbolizes, and how much, um, folks. I'm gonna use this word. How much echoes and how much connection. I won't give out too much context, but I'm gonna say this: Rocket Raccoon, Nebula, and Adam Warlock have such a connection to each other. Different dynamics, different relationships, but they have such a connection with each other. And for me, those three would be the triangle pyramid that connects to the main theme about this movie, about creation and responsibility, and um, what what does it mean to be alive, and identity, and self self identity. Because yeah, I'm doing my best not to get into
Yeah, no,
stuff, but
we can go from there. We can go from there.
no, but so I'll say this is that I think he was necessary. I think the execution is like debatable. Be like, that wasn't, you could have, there was an opportunity for improvement there, but I think he was necessary for the theme of this story. And yeah, I think he was necessary, but I can understand people's um takes with the execution of it. I didn't really have an issue with it. Again, maybe because that's how I went to the movie. That I was just more concerned about the main Guardians, and that he was just the cherry on top, or just the dessert that would come with it.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's all good. But yeah, let's close this out. Closing thoughts on this one. What do we rate it? What do we feel about it? I guess I'll go first. I think this was a very entertaining ride. Like it is maybe like as a character in Rocket Raccoon, emotionally, it's one of the strongest things the MCU's done in a minute. Honestly,
Hell yeah.
from an emotional resonant standpoint, I shouldn't be caring like I am. I shouldn't be weeping over, an animal, what I'm saying? Even though technically we've been doing it for years. Bambi, Lion King, daggone Land Before Time. We've been weeping
It's
for years over
it's
animals.
not new territory. Yeah.
But from a live action animal standpoint, I take that back. Homeward Bound as well. Anyway, but in the context of a superhero film, this is uncharted territory, right? And I think that James's execution with Rocket Raccoon and how pivotal he is, I think that was perfect. I think that the way that they crossed the High Evolutionary and how they worked and how he functioned, I think was really good. I just think that there was some loose threads here or there. I think that the soundtrack wasn't as strong as what I wanted it to be. And at the very end, there was a character that made a choice that really didn't make any sense to me. And also, an Ant-Man 3 moment happened that also rubbed me the wrong way, but I'm not going to go into that here. But I will
Okay.
still test this at in between a 7.5 or 8 out of 10. It's one or the other for me. I just don't know where I rank it, but it is better by far than the second Guardians for me. Like, it's just like the first one is such a high bar, but I do think I'll say this may be better than anything that Phase 4. Honestly, I mean that's not shade. It's just the truth. Like, this is actually a good movie. Like, it's not everything that I wanted. I'm not saying it's great, but I do think it's a good time. I just don't know if it's for kids, and I'm gonna leave that there.
That's a fair assessment on whether this is for kids or not. I've said that James Gunn, somehow he and Marvel had the connection that I think a lot of directors dream to have with the MCU, where your voice comes through and yet it fits with the MCU. The Guardians movies fit with the MCU, and yet it's James Gunn's territory. Um, I dug the movie so much right now, and again, it could be because I just seen it in the past 24 hours. But right now, I'm feeling a 9.0, 9.5, maybe 10 out of 10. I just hit it hit on all cylinders, and anything that could be a nitpick, there's a tower of greatness that surpasses it for me. I'm very intrigued to see other people's takes, and I'm gonna let the folks. If you don't know, we could say one thing right now in this recording on this Friday. of this month, of this year, and it could change and it could evolve, and that's okay. And it might go down for me, but who knows? And right now, I'm satisfied. I am. It
So
was the perfect ending for me.
yeah, it was a real ending. I will say that it was a
Yes.
real actual. And the MCU never really does that, but they
No.
gave this an actual ending.
Yeah. And um, what else I was gonna say about the characters and the whatnot? I I'm really intrigued to see other people's takes on it. I know I heard Lucas's take, and I was just like, I did the whole Dave Filoni thing of interesting, interesting, interesting. Being like, well, I didn't feel that way, but I wonder why he felt that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am so. I don't know if I told you, Sam, but the first movie came out the summer that I graduated from high school. I saw it in the movie theaters 4 or 5 times. So when
Mm.
I'm connecting it to Star Wars, I'm telling you, I'm like, this was what it felt back in 1977. And the soundtrack for me right now, it's not great or greater than the first two, but there's tracks that just are just as good as the first two. And what I'll say is that I can't wait to buy it on Blu-ray. I can't wait to hear the director's commentary. I can't wait to buy the soundtrack and to rewatch it again. I love these characters so much, and uh, the actors and the crew should take a bow.
Yeah, I'll give them their flowers. And to be fair, this may go up for me because a lot of the recent MCU films I could care less about rewatching. This one I would like,
We
and
said we talked about it, dude. We talked about buying Blu-rays. I'm gonna buy this Blu-ray. I haven't bought
right,
one in a while. So when people say
right,
this is just the best movie in the MCU since Endgame, I'm in it. I agree with that notion. To me, this I'm getting vibes of this being there with number one. Number one's still classic, but it is that good for me.
yeah. And I think that one of the things that throws it off is it starts off
Yeah.
like it. You don't think you're gonna hit an emotional moment, but very quickly it gets very emotional. And I mean, a lot of animes do that. They kind of like butter you up, making it all sweet and lighthearted, and all of a sudden something terrible happens. And again, that's James's approach to it. So I commend you, James Gunn, for what you did. And whether you do any more Marvel Universe stuff or if you continue on what you're doing, I do appreciate everything you've done for the Guardians. It's still near and dear to my heart as well as
Hell
you
yeah.
part of my crew. But yeah, we gotta go. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell button. Go to Ronan's channel. Where can everybody find you?
Thank you, my friend. You can find me at Ronan Unchained on YouTube, on Twitter. I'm gonna have either my channel or Sam's. We're gonna have to do a spoiler and just break it down once people have seen it and uh, gone on this journey with the Guardians. And yeah, a lot of more Star Wars stuff is gonna come down in terms of coverage for the channel.
Ooh, yes.
And yeah, and maybe something in the summer, something big might go down, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yes. Yes. The force is strong with this one. We're gonna go, guys. Everybody up here, like, subscribe, hit the bell button, subscribe to Ronan's channel as well. Peace, people.
Falling out the top of
I can see the skyline, 50 mile radius on my timeline.